Welcome back to another episode of Fund Friday. Another edition with someone who is really all over the internet. I'm starting to see your sponsored ads. Obviously, we follow one another, but I'm starting to see you all over the place. It's super fun, and your content creation is really taking another level. So we're going to talk about that and so much more. But thank you so much for coming on today, Austin Palacios, founder of Co-Hosting Acquisitions. How are you today?
I'm doing incredible, Craig. It is good to see you again, my friend. It was only a couple weeks ago that I had you on my podcast, so always good to connect.
Yeah, a little home and away. And did I get your name right?
You did actually, right
Good.
on point.
Yeah. Well, I knew if I didn't say it quick enough, it was going to escape me. So I'm a little bit dyslexic. So sometimes, it's not as phonetic as I'd like it to be. But really excited to have you today to talk about a bunch of stuff, which we actually haven't addressed on this platform yet, which is kind of the Airbnb space and a lot of things that you do personally. So with that said, can you just give us, an introduction about who you are, your background, and kind of how you got into the chair you're in today?
Yeah, absolutely, Craig. Happy to. So let me just I'll dig back to around 2019, 2018. I was working in wealth management. I just landed my first job out of college. And I was working for a bank in Chicago called BMO, Bank of Montreal, in their wealth management division. And shortly after starting that role, I kind of realized I wasn't really happy with the corporate America grind, right? The goal was to like work in high finance out of college, either investment banking, asset management, wealth management. I found my way into wealth management. It wasn't really what I was expecting it to be. So, matter of like 2 months into that role, I started looking for other options, right? And I ended up finding this podcast called Bigger Pockets, and they were talking about this term called financial freedom through real estate investing, something called house hacking. So about like 2 months, 3 months after finding that podcast, I ended up buying a small multifamily home, a triplex or a three flat, depending on where you are in the world. I ended up moving into that property, renovating the whole property, living in one unit. And then shortly after that, COVID ended up happening. And at this time, the whole world went remote. So I had the ability to work remote. Didn't really enjoy my time in Chicago that much. The winters were way too cold for my liking. So
You're a Florida guy. You in Chicago just doesn't make sense to me.
exactly, man. I literally went from Miami, Florida. I went to school down here. If anybody's familiar with it, it's called Florida International University. And I went to one of the coldest places in the whole U.S., Chicago, right? So I was there for about like a year or so, and COVID happened. Ended up coming back to Florida, moving to West Palm Beach, still working my job. And I'm looking for small multifamilies to pretty much repeat that whole process. And what the cool thing was is like I bought that property at the right time, renovated it. So I was able to pull out about $200,000. So I went into looking for small multifamily, couldn't really find anything down here that made sense from a number standpoint. So my agent at the time had a Airbnb, also known as short-term rental, and she was showing me her numbers. She was literally making like $4,000 cash flow on an annualized basis every single month. And I was like, wow, this like kind of makes sense. So ended up finding short-term rental, did the whole furnishing. I was cheap back in the day, so got stuff on Facebook Marketplace, launched that property around like Easter time. And then literally 3 days later after launching it, I had a booking for like $9,000 for 3 weeks. And I was just like, okay, well, this kind of makes sense, right? So 3 months later, bought another one in West Palm Beach. Shortly after that, I expanded to another market in Fort Lauderdale, bought a property down there, and then went into another market in Tampa, right? Bought another property there. And then 2022 ended up coming and interest rates started to rise, and the numbers that I was seeing back in the day weren't really making as much sense at this time. So started thinking outside the box. Like some people have talked about this term called Airbnb arbitrage, where you rent a property and put it online on Airbnb. And
I've
tried
conducted
one.
a lot of those leases before, actually, funny enough, in my past life.
Yeah. So I tried one of those, man, and I wasn't really a fan for multiple different reasons. But honestly, you got to like get everything passed by the landlord if something breaks, and then if they don't get fixed that same day, because in hospitality, as everybody knows, it needs to get fixed that same day. Like the guest is like the main priority. So tried that, didn't really like it that much. So then I switched over to something called Airbnb management, also known as co-hosting, which is pretty much managing Airbnbs for other people that do not have the time to do it themselves. So like say for example, like you have a high paying W-2 job, you're making, I don't know, $250,000, $300,000 a year. You want to buy a vacation house, but obviously it's not worth your time to manage it. You want somebody else to manage it. So I kind of found my niche there, and started managing for other people, started a company. And the cool thing with Airbnb management compared to investing in arbitrage is the fact that you have no risk at the end of the day, because you don't have to buy the house, you don't have to furnish it, you don't have to design it. All you have to do is literally find somebody that needs you to manage it for them, and then you take a 20% cut of the total revenue for that property. So the properties that I was doing investing in were doing between $120,000 and $150,000. So 20% of that is about $2,000 to $2,500 per month in income.
You stack a couple of those, you're doing pretty well, right? But also more than anything else, first off, real estate income is not W-2 income. So that's a lot more of a fluid, deductible income. And also the lifestyle is, obviously you're working for yourself, which means you can work any 24 hours in a day that you like. And usually you're working a lot of those hours, but at least you don't have someone breathing down your neck like a BMO situation.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something that I kind of glossed over, that I kind of forgot. So like 2021, it was around November time, right? So I was working my W-2 job. 6 months before that, they told me, hey, look, like you need to come back to Chicago. We're going to be back in there. I was like, hey, no, look, I don't want to go back to Chicago. They're like, okay, well, we have this office in Naples that you can move over to. So I moved over there. I was there for 6 months, absolutely hated it. And November time came around, and I asked my boss for time off. I asked my MD, hey, look, can I go visit my family for the holidays, for Christmas? She pretty much just said no, because we didn't have like coverage in the office. So with investing in real estate over the past few years, I had enough income to like support myself. It kind of had surpassed my income that I was making on that W-2 job. So I just ended up putting in my 2 weeks then, and then went full time into real estate. So that's kind of like a social norm, right? We talked about briefly on my podcast, but society always tells us like we're supposed to do certain things. We're supposed to go to school, get good grades, graduate, get a good paying job, and then go on 2-3 weeks of vacation, and then retire around like 60, 65, somewhere around there. And that's not really the path that I wanted for myself. So when I left that job, I wanted to keep on doing real estate. So then that's what led to the management side of things.
So question for you then, just to unpack that a bit, which is obviously a cool story. And, certainly a lot of people's paths looks different, but similar, but different. But on your end, were you kind of double dipping, if you will, on the management side of things, as well as your BMO job? What did that look like?
Yeah, no, it's funny that you bring that up, right?
And what did that transition period look like? Because there had to be an inflection point. Like, wait, I'm making this here and that there. If you were doing both, it's like, okay, well, why am I doing this?
Yeah, so it's so funny that you bring that up, Craig, because like in my mind, it was always like, hey, I'm never going to be in this job forever, and I'm shaking hands with some very high net worth individuals, and although that's like a little gray area, right? We shouldn't really be doing that, or BMO doesn't want me to do that. I was keeping track of like contacts that I was like interacting with on a weekly basis, and then when I ended up leaving that job, I ended up potentially like maybe I reached out to them. I'm not saying I'm going to say if I did or I didn't, but it was always in the back of my mind, right? Because the thing is like there's money there for deals to be done in the future. There's properties that they could potentially buy. Everybody wanted to get into the short-term rentals back in 2021 too. So during my time there, I wasn't double dipping, but could potentially led to something when I left.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So when you kind of had that refi kind of come through, you pulled out that 200K. Was that kind of the launching point where you felt you had at least enough of a tarmac and a off ramp to kind of be more entrepreneurial? Because you can always go back into, a normal kind of corporate like job. Someone like yourself who's high level can, find a job tomorrow, quite frankly. But the opportunity and the off ramp to have the little overhead with probably no wife and kids in that time and place in life is likely a shorter lived one than your potential to get back into, the more standard like setup. So, was that kind of the confidence that you needed to kind of break through into working for yourself there?
Yeah, man. I think the biggest thing is like fear holds a lot of people back. Like a lot of people want to be an entrepreneur or start their own business and work for themselves. But fear is like the limiting factor that always prevents everybody from taking that first step. And when around this, I was probably think I was probably like 25 at this time. Like you said before, like I had no kids, I had no wife. I had a bad car at that time. It was paid off. So I really had no overhead at that time. So I just said to myself, hey, look, if I don't do this now, when am I ever going to do it? Like this is a perfect situation. If things get bad, I can always go back and I can get another job or I can do something else like within a matter of 90 days, I believe. So I just took that risk, took that chance. And I believe it was a calibrated risk at the end of the day because I had my ducks in a row and I had been planning it over the past couple of years.
Yeah, and I think, risk is not all calculated equally. And I would also argue too that the risk of living a life that is not compatible, kind of living
Mm-hmm.
a life in which you aren't happy in your day to day. I mean, obviously, following your passion can be a little bit overrated, but being entrepreneurial and finding a way to make a buck is, smart. And I think the whole overall arching thought of job security, to me, and to a certain extent, it's a bit of an illusion because you can get fired and replaced at any moment.
Yeah.
So you might as well, live and die by your own sword there, if you will. That was always how I look at the world. It's like, I'd rather do something more entrepreneurial, do something with a higher upside than kind of be in a more fixed situation there, if you will. And I have a lot of friends that are in tech sales, interestingly enough, that make good money, but now they're kind of running into the income ceiling gap. They're in the
Mm-hmm.
situation where, hey, they have a massive year, great pop, but next thing you know, they change the commission structure on you and you're making, 2/3 of what you did the year before, although you're making more and they always move up your quotas. So that's also hard too. So it's a kind of a choose your hard thing there, if you will.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't have said that said that better myself, man. It's kind of like you got to think about it this way: is as the years go by, um, are you going to be in the same situation as you are currently 20 years from now? And like with me, what was like a huge benefit to myself is like I'll get anxiety if I'm in the same situation a year from now. Like I literally cannot stay still. I have to be doing something new every single year or growing my own business like to new standards. And that's what allowed me to take that risk and keep going. And then another thing is like imagine like you're 60, right? 70 years old, you're on your deathbed. And everybody says this all the time, but you look back at your life and you're just like, damn, I should have started that business, or I should have like traveled, or I should have asked that girl out. Whatever that situation is like you don't want to live your life on like what ifs whenever you're on your deathbed. So
Yeah, no, I have a couple kind of thoughts. So on that and kind of social norms, as you say, and we'll kind of go back to that and circle back to that theme because that's kind of one of the big premises to your podcast, which we'll get into in a little bit. But two thoughts that I have that you really just sparked there. Thought number one is as a year concludes, what do you have to show forth? Did you make some investments? Did you take a risk? Did you do something that kind of moved you forward? Or, as the year gone on, and now going from 29 to 30 for myself here, I just turned 30, from 30 to 31. Are you kind of stacking your chips more and more to make your life incrementally better? And then the second thing is, I don't want to do anything in life without a compounding benefit. What does that mean? So that means that if it's a relationship, if it's work related, if it's health related, anything that I do, anything that I put time into has to have some sort of compounding benefit, or I don't want to be associated with it or doing it. So that's people, of course, kind of surrounding yourself with the right people, the right influences. And of course, from a career perspective, a dead end job to me sounds like I'm dying, quite frankly, because it's not allowing me to do what I want to do. And, that's just a situation that I don't want to be in, quite frankly. So I will work very tirelessly and hard to avoid that. So compounding benefits and what have you showed forth in the year, two of the big principles that I kind of live by.
no, I love that, man. I love that. So I want to answer a question too first. So I'm addicted to optimizing my life to the best of its ability, right? So what does that look like? We can talk about like health first. Like, all right, what can I do from a health standpoint to better my life? Like, what does my diet look like? What does my sleep schedule look like? What does my gym routine look like? What are the small things I can do on a daily basis to like increase my level of optimization to 1%, right? It could be something as small as wearing blue light glasses like an hour before you go to bed so you can get like a good night's sleep, or like following like a strict diet plan, like counting all your macros. Because the thing is like what I realized recently is I just started fasting till like 2 o'clock every single day. And I realized if I fast at 2 o'clock every single day, my energy levels are like 25% increase compared to like if I eat at like 8 o'clock, 8 a.m., 9 a.m. in the morning. It's like just having that increased energy allows me to do more things throughout the day. Or like even like even being in like toxic relationships, man, like can hugely impact your productivity as well. So like making sure you're surrounding yourself with the right people, which is something you just touched on briefly. So I'm a
Yeah.
huge component of that. Anything that I could potentially do, whether it's like listening to podcasts, like figuring out another way to increase my personal brand, digital marketing, real estate, like any way that I can better myself, I'm gonna do it. It's
Yeah.
just
So let's
how
get
I am.
right. So let's get back to Airbnb briefly. So
Mhm.
if you're a manager, you're a co-host, right? You're
Mhm.
basically the Airbnb manager for people on top of your own properties. How many of those do you realistically need, or what's like the overall maybe revenue number that you need to make a good living? And good living is relative, but for someone like yourself to feel comfortable, how many properties do you want to be carrying at a time? And how do you decide what you say yes and no to?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. So let's just, I don't know, let's just say income is like $120,000 a year. Like that's what you want to be making. And just for quick math, that's $10,000 like a month in income, right? So depending if you're investing or if you're managing, we'll break both of those down. So if you're investing, realistically, you should be making anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 if you're buying a good deal for a short-term rental. $2,000 a month in net income after paying all expenses, or $4,000. So realistically, you could buy two that are bringing 4,000 each, and then one that brings in 2,000. So then you're at three, and then you're hitting $10,000 a month in income. Now, what I will say though, with short-term rentals compared to long-term rentals, is there's a lot more time spent in managing it compared to long-term rentals. You throw in a lease for 12 months, you barely hear from the tenant unless something breaks. With short-term rentals, like you're probably going to hear from every other guest asking questions. Where's the
And a
remote?
neighbor.
Yeah, and the neighbors, man. My neighbors are crazy. So just something to keep in mind, right? Like you can definitely make more income, but you're going to be a lot more involved. So you got to ask yourself, like, what are your goals? Like, are your goals to be able to leave your job and make as much income as you possibly want, or do you have a good paying job right now and you just want some passive income and somewhere to potentially put your extra income, which would be long term rentals? So then if we look into managing Airbnbs for other people, if we're targeting properties that are doing $120,000 in revenue every single year and we're charging 20%, you're making about $2,000 per month. So for you to get to that $10,000 threshold, you need about 5 properties to do so.
Makes sense. So you need about 5 there that are making in that threshold, as you alluded to. Is there a certain max out or number that you're looking to get to on your end? And then how do systems kind of come into play? And then do you also have a geographical location that you say yes to, or will you kind of manage, kind of remotely all over the place depending on the opportunity?
Yeah, so if anybody's starting their management business, I always tell them, hey, just start in your backyard, right? As long as you have some properties that can produce like decent income, start in your backyard. So for me, like I'll do Vero Beach all the way down to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. It's probably a time because I was based in West Palm, so that was home. So Vero Beach was probably about an hour north. Fort Lauderdale was about an hour south, so kind of made sense. It wasn't too far out. Um, and as far as number of properties, not really. I mean, I set up certain systems in place in the beginning to like have organic traffic find me. So what that looks like is I have a website and people can come in that are looking for property management in South Florida and they'll fill out a form and then I'll either give them a call or somebody from my team will give them a call and then we'll just figure out what they're looking for it to accomplish. And then as far as systems go, pretty much what it looks like is we have a PMS software, that property management software, which integrates between all the different booking platforms. So you have Airbnb, you have Vrbo, you have Booking.com. If a booking comes in from Airbnb, it links to the Vrbo calendar, the Booking.com calendar, and then you can send your automated messaging out on that PMS software. So check-in instructions, check-out instructions, inquiry instructions, anything like that. Then you have pricing software, right? So Price Labs is a big one for pricing software. I honestly recommend people, like if you have over 5 properties, use a revenue manager. So I have a revenue manager that does all my pricing for me because your owners are going to be upset only when they're not making money. So like you need to be on top of their pricing like 2 to 3 times a week per property. That's the big one. And then you want to have like an ops manager that kind of slashes as your onboarding manager because onboarding a new property takes like a lot of time. It's going to take the majority of the time. Once your property is onboarded, it's literally an hour to 2 hours, like a week managing that one property. So that's kind of what I would say. And then the other good teammate that you want to have is a cleaner. A cleaner is going to be like your eyes and ears. You're not going to go to that property every single day. You're going to have a cleaner go over there. So they're going to take photos after every clean, before every clean, so you know the condition of that property. And then your operations manager is then going to check their work and check to make sure nothing was damaged as well. If anything's damaged, then they're going to submit that to either Airbnb, Vrbo, or Booking.com.
What do you think the hardest system is to kind of perfect, or the biggest moving part is in your experiences? Would you say, is it the dynamic pricing, or is it, the cleaners? What in your opinion is the hardest to solve for?
Dude, the hardest issue with Airbnb management is not the owners, it's not the cleaners, it's not the pricing, um, or not the guests. I'm sorry. The hardest aspect to deal with is the owners themselves, because you got to think about it this way. Like, most likely this is a lot of money to like an owner, right? That bought a second home. It's their baby. They potentially come down there once or twice a year to vacation. You got to be careful which owners that you onboard, because there's some owners that are HMOs, high maintenance owners. And I've had some that were
I love the acronym.
dude, I've had some that were like insane, dude. Like, you can't imagine that. So it's very important. Like, as they're interviewing you, you need to interview them too, because one HMO will take up 90% of your time. So it's very important to vet them correctly before you take them on as a potential client.
So how did that refinement process change as you've become more tenured, as you've got your own investments going? How have you kind of gone through the process of kind of vetting people? Have you kind of started saying no to more people than yes, if you will, when you get to kind of a certain kind of level of, income coming in? Because you only have so much time in the day. And as you said, you don't want to be bottlenecked by, one or two people that, takes up, more time than maybe the other 10 that you have, right?
Yeah, man, exactly. So, like, for example, I had this person call me the other day, and the property was going to make $60,000 a year on Airbnb, which isn't that much money. And I just said to him, man, I'm just like, why do you want to make this an Airbnb? Why don't you just make this a long-term rental? And he was just like, oh, because I'm going to make more money. And I was like, no, you're really not going to make more money, because you're going to be paying electric, you're going to pay Wi-Fi, you're going to pay all these other expenses as a short-term rental compared to a long-term rental. And then you're going to pay me 20% too. It makes way more sense to make this a long-term rental. So in those situations, I turn them away, because at the end of the day, they're not happy when they're not making money. And if they realize, after I onboard them, spend like a week onboarding them, and then I get them up and running. And then after like 2 or 3 months, they're not happy, they're not making as much money as they thought they were going to be, they're going to end up leaving, right? So it just makes sense for me to turn them away at this point.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, that's also just, classic opportunity cost scenario where, you don't want to do something that is going to be a short-term, thing, if you will, right? So that
Yeah.
fully makes sense. So, yeah, with that said, we kind of talked about this briefly, but, I've sold over 40 Airbnbs in my life. Some of them are doing so well. A lot of them are not doing so well right now. And a lot of them have been transitioned into long-term rentals and whatnot. And obviously it's market per market. I think Airbnb was really hot during COVID, because it was kind of one of the ways you could really only travel together and be around people, is if you kind of had the loophole of renting a house together, kind of having a good time with some buddies, connecting in that regard. Now that, the world is more normal, if you will, there's, of course, a time and place for a hotel, and there's a time and place for an Airbnb. There's situations where if I'm going to be somewhere for a couple of nights, I'm going to go with a hotel. But if I'm going to be somewhere for a week, I'm going to go with an Airbnb. If I'm with a bunch of friends, I'll probably go with an Airbnb. If it's just me and my girlfriend, I'll probably choose a hotel. All that says to lead up is, the landscape has changed without a doubt over the last 2-3 years from when he started to now.
Yeah.
So can you kind of talk about the different landscapes and maybe how regionally dependent the Airbnb market truly is? Because it certainly is better in some places, worse in others. So I'd love to hear your kind of thoughts and take.
Yeah, 100%, man. The thing is like, it's difficult to stand out in Airbnb right now if you don't know what you're doing, right? And it's difficult to make money in Airbnb right now if you don't know what you're doing. So what do I mean by that? Like, remember back in the day when I told you I bought that first property and I was cheap, and I just bought Facebook Marketplace furniture and threw it in there, and I made $9,000 for like 3 weeks. That's you can't do that anymore. That doesn't work. What you need now is you need a really good designer. You need like pops of color. You need amazing amenities, and you need to be in a good location as well. And the more people you can sleep, the better off you'll be. So what I always recommend is, like, I hired this designer. Her name is Bridget Bitch. You can find her on Instagram. She's phenomenal, great person, great design. and she'll make your Airbnb to the point where you're getting booked 80% of the year, right? So that's really what you need to do. You need to find somebody that's like specialized in designing short-term rentals Airbnbs and go through it that way. Because the thing is like no matter where you are, you can tell me, hey, look, Miami's saturated, Fort Lauderdale is saturated. There's still a top 10% of those properties that are absolutely killing it. And those are the ones with the design and amenity. It doesn't matter. Like if a market's saturated, your property just kind of sucks. But if you find a good designer, you won't have that issue.
Right. So designer is very crucial. What are other key elements that you would recommend for yourself if you were to kind of build out your dream kind of property there? And what you'd recommend other folks that you potentially work with from a kind of setup perspective, from a, I guess, setup perspective, and also just amenity perspective that someone needs in order for there to be success achieved?
Yeah, so I can talk about my market down here in South Florida. So the properties that do the best are going to be 5 bedrooms or bigger, with a pool, 10 minutes from the beach, designed in something that's going to pop, that's unique. Um, and then as far as the amenities goes, like it has to have a pool, hot tub, putting green, pool table, air hockey table. I've even seen Airbnbs with a golf simulator in the garage that they converted. Like whatever you can do to like make your stuff stand out is what you need to do, to get more bookings. So those are just a few things that you can potentially do down here as well. Fire pit. Just think about like if you were going to an Airbnb, what would you really want to like have that would bring you and your guests together and like foster memories and a good time?
Yeah. The question for you too is there has been a lot of, I guess not hate per se, but a lot of, I guess, negativity surrounding that in the Airbnb space right now. Cause I think some people just thought it was super easy, which we've just broken down that it's not easy and it's more saturated than ever. There's more competition than ever. It's the
Mhm.
worst kept secret that, Airbnb is a better way to probably create some cash flow in some circumstances. But, how would you kind of overall analyze the state of Airbnb right now? Because I do think there's always a place in the market for it. But as I said, it's not as much of a, oh yeah, I'll just get an Airbnb now because it's not inherently cheaper than a hotel.
Yeah, definitely. So the thing is like we got to look at like the data, right? So everybody wants to look at the data from 2021. Like we had a huge increase in average daily rate, ADR, occupancy, and everything because of COVID, right? And then where we are now in 2024, I believe the Airbnb market has normalized, right? So like we're not seeing like massive jumps. We're kind of just like increasing by like 3%, whatever you want to call it for normal real
Rent
estate.
growth. Yeah.
Yeah, for rent growth. So I think it's fine for the time being. Obviously, we're in an election year right now. November is 2 months away. Who knows what's going to happen to the economy going into 2025? But for the time being, everything that I'm currently seeing in the market is completely fine. I think you can still make money on Airbnb. I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. I think what is happening is those people that got involved in 2022 and 2023 when interest rates were higher, they could hit these numbers, are kind of losing their hats. They're having to put their properties on the market right now. They didn't buy right, and they didn't really know how to analyze their numbers correctly. So those are like the horror stories that you're hearing about where people are losing money on Airbnb. But if you know what you're doing, you can still make money with short-term rentals.
Right. That makes sense. And I think it goes back to, hobbyist or expert, right? The hobbyist is probably losing their shirt, thinks they can get the most with doing the least. The expert is looking at the data, looking at the competition, looking at comps, and really figuring out how they can distinguish themselves in the marketplace. And I think it's so crucial to think about is kind of that factor right there is, are you the hobbyist or are you the expert? And what does that look like for you? And how do you navigate that?
Yeah.
So that's really interesting to think about there.
Yeah, no, Craig, you literally just touched on it. Like people just don't realize you have a business, right? Even if you have one Airbnb, you have a business.
Yeah.
You need to treat it like a business. And it's the exact same process that you talked about. Like how do you stand out in the marketplace? What do you need to do? It doesn't have to just be Airbnbs. It could be like any business that you're looking to get involved in. If you don't treat it as an actual business, you're not going to be successful at the end of the day.
It's also very interesting as well, Austin. You're going to laugh at this because you've gone through this before. So as I said, I've sold about 40-ish Airbnbs in my previous life, right? What's interesting to me, and just an interesting thought, is that the Airbnbs that are actually doing the best are not in, the hottest place in Old Town Scottsdale. They're actually kind of in areas where they kind of analyze the map, and it's a dollar on cent return, where you're maybe not buying the
Mhm.
sexiest real estate per se, but you're buying in areas where if you just put in a little bit of elbow grease and do a good job with kind of setting the property up and manage it well, you're going to kind of smoke everyone else who's, kind of doing the other stuff, who's doing, I guess you could say the hotter, Old Town Scottsdale properties, if you will, or probably like the most primo Central Miami properties. But if you look at and analyze the marketplace, and
Mhm.
there's not a ton of options there, dollar and cent, you can actually do a lot better. I've got one client and friend who is also selling houses now in the Phoenix area. Funny enough, I sold him the house, and he's more than double, or he's about now equaled his principal on his down payment. So he's basically at infinite return levels at this point,
Mhm.
which is nuts. But he's doing almost as much revenue or more revenue than places that were purchased for nearly double his property, which is
Yeah.
crazy to think about. So when you look at properties, do you kind of analyze things like that? And also when you take on a new client, do you kind of show clients, what their competition looks like, just to kind of manage expectations and kind of just make sure that they're, in lockstep with you, if you will? Because the worst thing you can have is someone who's not realistic.
Yeah, man, 100. Dude, that's so it's so funny that you bring that up. Yeah, if you're okay with going into any single market, there's this website. I think it's called SCR Insights, and pretty much what they do is they break down all of these rural markets all across the U.S. They look at the purchase price, and they look at the average daily rate, and then the revenue, and then occupancy for that market, and then they give you like your return, what it's going to look like if you put down your down payment, how much money you could potentially make,
A
and if you
cap
can,
rate calculator, basically,
yeah.
depending on the market. That's very cool. What's that website called?
I want to say it's STR Insights.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Yeah, so I want
I
to
know
say
there's
it's,
like Price Labs you mentioned. I know there's
yeah.
Air DNA, and then this
Hmm.
one as well, which is all kind of in the elk, similar in that regard, software services, DNA data analyzers, if you will.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's cool. So pretty much what that does is it allows you to look into other markets. If you're willing to go to any other market, it doesn't have to be Miami, it doesn't have to be Scottsdale, it could be anywhere. You can make a lot of a better return with the amount of cash that you put down from an ROI standpoint. So I would definitely look there too. If you really want to get involved in short term rentals and you don't really care what market is in, you can find a rural market where there's no supply of short term rentals, or they're being managed by mom and pop operators. They don't have any um, lifestyle type photography, short term rental photography in there. They don't have any of the amenities. You can crush that. You can make your own top of the market, if you will.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense as well, and it's just different people get different results, and if you are creating the market, because I think that is creating the market. If you
Hmm.
can do that, you will obviously be inherently successful. If it's funny, if you just do what other people aren't willing to do or aren't doing, you just
Yeah.
follow that model, and you'll likely find success in whatever endeavor you like to choose. Right?
Yeah.
Um,
100%.
yeah,
But there is a little bit of fear behind that, right? Because going to that market, you're going to be thinking, "Hey, look, I am creating this market, this new top to this market. Is it going to work out? Is it not going to work out?" Right? You just kind of have to have faith in yourself that it will.
right. So another question for you I have is kind of just talking about the big kind of big house name, Avant Stays, the Evolve, kind of places like that I'm aware of that are kind of the bigger managers that, probably are a little bit less personalized. Maybe, I can't speak negatively or positively, but I have had a lot of people that were there and then kind of went away. Can you kind of speak on what they do well, what they don't do well, and if you've picked up clients before or kind of talk with people that are looking to make a switch, and what maybe your experience has been with said groups like that I alluded to?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Vacasa Evolve, they're great at marketing, they're great at sales, they're great at branding. They kill the game. Everybody knows them. If I
Which is
bought this,
worth something.
yeah, exactly. So if I bought a property as a vacation rental, I'd probably get a postcard from like Vacasa within the next like 2 or 3 months, because last year they spent $7.5 million on postcards alone, not even touching digital marketing or email campaigns or anything like that. So everybody knows their brand, but the issue is like they scaled so quickly that they don't have their systems in place. So if you look at the reviews are negative. They're like, people can't get a hold of somebody whenever they're staying at the property, or their cleaning isn't impeccable. There's dirty sheets or whatever that situation is. So their owners usually aren't happy, right? But they're the only property managers that they actually know about. So what allowed me to scale quickly is my whole pitch was, "Hey, I'm a boutique manager. I invest in short-term rentals myself. I'm going to treat your property like it's my own. I'm not a major corporation, so I'm going to give it the care and love that it needs." And so it allowed me to scale pretty quickly and just pick up properties from these larger property managers like Vacasa and Evolve.
Makes
So
sense. And has there been a kind of a big theme of people kind of going away from those as they may have overpromised and over-delivered on projections, or just, people kind of realizing the regional nature of things? Because I think a big theme that's been kind of unpacked on my podcast here and with Rob and I and kind of overall network is just truly how regional real estate is. This is not a one-size-fits-all. This is a nuanced equation. We do not speak in absolutes, if you will.
yeah. Yeah. Sorry, can you rephrase that question one more time?
Yeah, so just, how regional the business is. It's kind of just a thought of this is such a regional business. There's a lot of nuance associated to that. And, of course, the bigger kind of groups, we know them. They're in the multifamily space, they're in the self-storage space, they're in the real, or, short-term rental space, the long-term rental space. You can get an okay job, but it seems as if the more boutique and more, regional expert will always win over the bigger kind of shops. They're just not as big.
Yeah, 100%. Like me personally, I'd rather go with a boutique manager every single day. If I can find somebody with 20 properties or less, I'd much rather have them manage my short-term rental for me compared to a larger property manager. But the issue is, Craig, is all these owners, they don't know that these boutique managers exist out there and they don't know how to find them, right? So that's why it's so important to like have your branding and your SEO set up like to like the point where somebody should be able to go into Google in your market, Scottsdale, type in Airbnb property manager, and then your boutique management company should be able to show up on page one. You need to be able to do that so these people can find you, because there are a lot of people out there that are in pain that are looking for other options, and they don't want to sell their property because a lot of people are at the point right now where they need to sell their property because they're not hitting the numbers that these larger property managers promise them.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I also want to speak about something. It's totally switching gears here, but you kind of posted on your Instagram story just the want of to move because you just moved from Palm Beach to Miami and how impactful that's kind of been already, but just kind of the benefits from being there. So can you talk about kind of your recent, move and how that will kind of facilitate, increasing, your personal brand and content creation, things of that nature?
Yeah, so the first thing that I'll bring up is personal brand is everything in 2024. Like everybody needs a personal brand, and I know like a lot of people are probably listening to this and saying to themselves, "Oh, I don't want to post like on social media. Like I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to take selfie videos." And I was completely like that. I started.
So was I.
Yeah, I started creating content back in 2019, and was like me with a phone on a tripod, slightly slanted, and I was writing on a whiteboard and you couldn't even read what I was writing, right? And I kind of got discouraged back in the day and I just put it down. And about like probably like a year ago, I was just like, you know what, I'm going to take this personal branding thing seriously. I'm going to make it professional. I'm just going to start and I'm not going to stop. And the reason I did that is because there's a few different reasons, but the thing is people end up finding you and knowing who you are and knowing what you're doing if you just post on social media every single day. So what does that mean? It means you can find new clients. It means you can find more money for deals. It means you can connect with like-minded individuals in your city or even the world, wherever you're located. And then the other thing is like, from a helping standpoint, there's always going to be somebody one or two steps before you, right? So with you posting content and sharing information, people are actually able to gain knowledge and learn from you, and it's going to help them in their actual process. So imagine if you had somebody that you were learning from like 5 years ago, and they were posting all this content out there to be able to help you and get you to your goal so much sooner. So from a helping standpoint, as well as being able to connect with other people, there's nothing out there, right? There's nothing better. And then if you're also saying to yourself, hey, look, I don't want to be that guy taking selfies, videos. At the end of the day, you're kind of selfish. Right? You're selfish that you're not willing to help other people. So for your question though, why I decided to move to Miami, because there's so many more people down here that are creating personal brands, that are well connected, building 8-9 figure businesses down here. And I was living in West Palm Beach over the past like few years, ever since I moved from Chicago. And I kind of feel like I just like outgrew that. There wasn't too many people to connect with. I was driving to Miami way too much.
Probably a great place to raise a family, but with where you're at in your life and career, probably doesn't make sense to live the slower pace of life, if you will.
Yeah, 100%. Dude, and there's an abundance of money on Palm Beach Island. There is. But it's like the dude is like 70, 80 years old. He's not somebody building a personal brand, starting a business. He already created his wealth. Like if you're going to raise capital, okay, great. Go to Palm Beach, West Palm Beach. But if you're new in the game and you're starting off in your career, Miami's a great place to do that. Like for example, I was just telling you, I just joined this new gym down here called Boxer in Miami, and I joined yesterday. I was in there today. Somebody was filming content. I literally just went up to him, started talking to him, and we're in like the same network already. And we're going to end up lifting tomorrow together as well. And he's building a business too. So it's just like being so close to other people that are trying to do the same things with you is huge, and that's the main reason why I decided to move to Miami.
Yeah, no, the ecosystem there has become very, very impressive. And it's kind of funny. Things go in cycles, things ebb and flow. And, one thing I've kind of learned in my life, being 30 is things really just change and move. And, there's evolutions of things.
Mhm.
And Miami right now is truly one of the best places to live and work in the country. I think
Yeah.
I would argue right now Miami and New York are probably the premier places to live, work, and to kind of grow, and where entrepreneurs are frankly just kind of flocking to right now. I mean, I think the Bay Area and LA, not saying those places aren't, obviously upper end there. You could throw Austin into the mix, but Miami is really kind of throwing its hat in the ring as one of the front runners to kind of establish yourself from a career and really network and find more like-minded people.
Yeah, dude, and it's huge. It's just like it motivates you too because literally, so when I moved into my apartment, the first thing I noticed before I get to my parking spot, I passed by four Lamborghinis, I passed by five Rolls Royces, I passed by a few G Wagons, and then just surrounding that with yourself, all that wealth around you pushes you to even work harder, right? Because you can see it. It's like right there in front of you. When I was in West Palm, I rarely saw those cars. Like maybe like every now and then if I was on Palm Beach Island, downtown, but there's so many. It's kind of crazy, um, say the least.
Yeah. So moving forward here to kind of wrap up, we've got a topic that we've talked about, or you really talk about, which is breaking social norms. So that's
Mhm.
kind of the big theme. We've kind of cracked some of those. Kind of goes hand in hand with entrepreneurship because you're kind of doing something psychotic to, to not get paid for a little bit of time, to have hopefully an outsized return. That's what we're all looking for when you kind of get into that entrepreneurial space, or you take a job with carry or, interest in that regard or equity, right?
Yeah.
But can you kind of talk about what that means to you, why that's the theme of your podcast, and how you kind of bring that into your life and incorporate it?
Yeah, 100%. I love talking about social norms. So let's break it down right now. So the whole like my whole mission in this life currently is to break down social norms, right? And social norms can pretty much be anything that society told us since the beginning of time on how we're supposed to live our life, right? So what I think of social norms, and I'll give you a few different ones. Like touched on in the beginning, go to college, get good grades, get a job, be happy with that. That's how you're supposed to live your life. Another one
Clock
is
in,
like
clock out. Yeah,
clock in, clock out.
work the typical corporate job, selling insurance, working a nice 9 to 5, 2 weeks vacation, and that's that. Which is a fine life. Not saying anything's wrong with it, but
Mhm.
I think something like yourself, you probably want a little bit more.
Yeah, if you whatever you want in this life, you can have it as long as you put in the effort, put in the time, and you're consistent. You can have whatever you want in this life. It's not impossible. And the other thing is like alcohol, right? So we touched on that on my podcast. Is like it's normal in society to be able to drink alcohol whenever we're sad, whenever we're happy, whenever we're celebrating anything. We just drink it like it's normal. And I believe that society imposed alcohol to like keep people kind of restrained in the rat race, if you will. Because if you drink alcohol, you're slow, you're sluggish, you don't really have motivation, and then you just keep on going on that will, right? So like if you can break away from that, like me personally, like I barely drink now. Like I'll drink every now and then. But back in the day, I used to drink way too much. And I just realized, hey, look, it's not good for me. It's not what I should be doing. It's not going to help me reach my goals. So that's another one. And then the third thing is like the things that we are or aren't supposed to talk about, right? So like in corporate America, you're not really supposed to talk about religion. Like remember when I started my job, like instead of saying like Merry Christmas, everybody was saying Happy Holidays, right? And I just kind of like I believe in Christmas or whatever, so I want to be able to say Merry Christmas. Like it's just a social norm that like society imposed on us so that we don't affect somebody or negatively impact somebody with like how we feel and how we see things. It's just if you feel a certain way, you should be able to say that. You shouldn't have to censor yourself, which is like what I'm trying to help people realize and get for themselves. at the end of the day.
That makes sense. So how does that incorporate, what are some of the key things that you've changed? Obviously, you alluded to, I mean, two major ones I can think of right now,
Mm.
cutting down drinking, then obviously working for yourself. Certainly two things that, most people do not do. Is there
Mhm.
anything else that you kind of, can speak on there as well that's a little bit against the grain there, if you will?
Yeah,
And also, the biggest impact you've had or seen other people do and make perhaps, and maybe other examples from people's themes on your show?
yeah. I think a big one is self development, right? So, like, for example, like I'm not a big fan of college unless you're going to be like a doctor, dentist, whatever it is.
STEM or medicine,
Damn,
right?
yeah, exactly. Um, but like self development is huge for myself, right? And I don't know. I've invested probably over like $50,000 in self development over the past 2 years, and it's always a huge ROI. And a lot of the time, you don't see that ROI like right away because it's intangible. You'll see it like a year later, maybe 6 months later, whatever that looks like. Um, and society like tells us, hey, look, maybe we shouldn't pay for this coaching from this guy that we met online or met in person, whatever it is, because they want to keep you trapped, right? They want you to keep working your job. They want you to keep going to college. They want your kids to go to college. But if you invest in yourself, it allows you to break away from those society norms on like how you are supposed to live your life.
Yeah, I mean, kind of what you're alluding to is being in the hamster wheel and the rat race, if you will, of the 9 to 5 or just the typical life, right?
Mhm.
And to your point there, that was something that just wasn't going to work for me there, if you will. I kind of knew that I wanted to do something where I was in a little bit more of control of what I had from a upside perspective and an income perspective. And I never want to take that golden handcuff. So just to kind of break down something that I've done for some people who know this, don't know this, but right when I graduated college and moved to the Bay Area, I was doing residential real estate, I was making no money, and I could have
Mhm.
easily gone into tech sales and kind of had a little bit of a golden handcuff. But I kind of realized, hey, that's kind of a trap to not have you kind of follow your dreams. And I'd rather be stubborn and perhaps probably pretty stupid to not take a job that would probably pay me 6 figures pretty quickly. And that was when 6 figures was actually 6 figures in about 2016.
Yeah.
But I elected to not go down that road because I didn't want to get trapped there. And I knew that my dream of real estate was more important than making a quick buck today. And now I look back and I'm very grateful for that. So,
Yeah.
to kind of avoid yourself from doing that and avoiding, that route, if you will, the unconventional route will have dividends. And you look a little crazy and, you got to make sacrifices. I think it was the easiest sacrifice because now I live a life that, if my 22-year-old, 23-year-old self saw where I was today, that person would be very proud and thankful for the efforts that I made. So I want to keep gifting my future self, my 40-year-old self from my 30-year-old self, and so on and so forth. You can kind of do the math down the line there. So what that looks like and what that means. But to me, it's just the biggest no-brainer. The biggest investment you can make is into yourself, and that's the smartest one to make as well.
100%, man. And it doesn't have to just be breaking away from the rat race. It could be numerous different things, man. It could be like your relationships. Maybe right now isn't like the right time for you to get married or find somebody to build a future with. And society wants you to get married at like 28, 30 years old or whatever it is. But if right now isn't the right time for you to do that, like build yourself up, become the best version of yourself. And if you want to get married at 40, 50, it's completely fine. I feel like society tells us it's weird to be that age and be getting married or building a life with somebody else. But if you're just not ready for that, like there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, no, and everyone's on their own path and journey. I think it's super
Mhm.
important to kind of harp on. But Austin, you've been great. We could talk forever, but we got to wrap up. I know you have somewhere to go. I got somewhere to go. With that said, where can people find you? Where can people reach out to you, get a hold of you if they want to learn about your systems, what you're doing, and things of that nature?
Yeah, of course, Greg. Well, it's been a pleasure. The best way for anybody to find me is on Instagram, Austin__ Palacios, or you can find me at my website, austinpalacios.com as well.
Awesome. For those who've been listening, thank you so much, and we'll see you next week. Peace.
Thank you.